Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Welcome to my latest episode in Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is here. And we have a very, very special guest today that I'm thrilled to present to you. His name is Lee Chambers, and he lives in the northern part of the UK. And he's young. So when you hear how much he's accomplished, you're going to be blown away. But he actually got an autoimmune disease that was related to arthritis that took away his ability to walk. And he refused to be there. He did everything in his power to figure out how to get his health back. So he's my kind of guy because that's what I'm presenting to you guys. I want you to hear from people who are resilient, who cared enough about their own health that they researched it and they turned the way their bodies feel. So Lee Chambers is an environmental psychologist, a well-being consultant, and the founder of Essentialise Workplace Wellbeing. And he has spent 10 years working in a variety of fields, but now is working in performance nutrition, environmental psychology, and advanced sleep consultancy. So we'll ask him how to sleep because I know a lot of you are having problems with that. One of the things I love, other than the fact that he was so resilient and he got himself back to health and reversed his chronic illness, is that he works with disabled youngsters and coaches them on a team. So he's an all-around great guy. He's married with 2 children, and he has a story that you need to hear. So I'm delighted to bring it to you. So Lee, welcome to my podcast.
It's a pleasure to be on with you today, Cheryl.
Thank you. So let's start with, how did you end up in this predicament where suddenly you lost your ability to walk?
Yeah, so if anything, I was 29, so I just turned 29. My son was 18 months old, and my wife was 6 months pregnant with my daughter. And I'd never been admitted to hospital in my life in the UK. I'd always been well and fit and healthy, and in many ways, I'd looked after myself. I would exercise and I would eat, well for the comparative place where I live, where there's a whole range of different diets and things that people try, but I always try to eat in an informed way. And coming from that performance nutrition background and having worked in sports and seeing that what you eat simply affects what you can do, both physically and mentally, when you're really pushed to perform at another level. So I was always very mindful of that kind of thing. And I'd been through a few challenges earlier in my life, including some mental health issues at university, that I'd had to kind of step back and reflect and really practice that resilience through challenge. And then I actually graduated in 2007. So as we now face a challenging time, I actually graduated into the last recession, got myself a graduate job, which was very prestigious, and then lost it after 6 months because of the economic conditions. So I'd had those two little hiccups in my life and had to go back to the drawing board again and start again. And the truth is, nothing can prepare you for being in that situation where I had my own business and I was, self-sufficient, I was comfortable, and this comes along and made me very uncomfortable very quickly. It happened really acutely. So over the course of 5 days, the first thing that happened, it was a Friday afternoon, and my wrist started to swell up. And I was like, maybe I've banged it on something when I've been, doing my daily life, running around, messing about with my son. Or maybe I've just used the computer too much this week, and maybe I just need to rest it over the weekend. So I wake up on Saturday and it's still like swollen and locked in place. And I'm like, okay, I should go and see the doctor on Monday because they don't open over the weekend in the UK. And I went out for
here either.
Yeah, and I went out for a meal on Sunday with my family and friends to a local restaurant. And on the way back, I was sat in the car, and by the time I got home, which was only about a 30-minute drive, my knee had started to go increasingly hot, inflamed, and started to swell up as well. So I kind of hobbled into the house and had a bit of a moment where I was like, okay, so if it's happened to my wrist and now it's happening to my knee, something systematically is going a little bit wrong. And I definitely need to go to the doctor in the morning and see if they can see what it is. So I hobble along to the doctors on Monday morning and show him both joints and say, look, this is significantly affecting my mobility and it's particularly painful. What can you do for me? And in true doctor fashion, he says, oh, well, that swelling is quite significant. Here's a prescription for some corticosteroids. If they don't take the swelling down in a few days, come back and we'll investigate you further. So off I trot. And the truth is, we live in this world where we honestly believe medical professionals are well-trained and they have some level of expertise to be able to give you advice that is useful. You're just a human being who specializes in something else. So you couldn't possibly question that. So I start taking these corticosteroids thinking that maybe this will just take the edge off and maybe this will just go away. Because at the same time as well, I'm a young man. I'm quite hard-headed. I'm quite like, oh, it'll be fine. Except it wasn't, because I woke up on Tuesday and my shoulder was inflamed and started to rise up towards my ear. And I was like,
your body was definitely trying to get your attention.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, this is serious now, and it's quite painful. And I'm gonna be still be a young man and give it one more day for these corticosteroids to work. And if nothing happens, then I need to go to the hospital. So I wake up on Wednesday morning and my other knee is starting to lock in place. And my mother-in-law comes round and she says, you're not waiting anymore. So she literally pulls me out of the house and I go off to hospital and go into the emergency department. And they take one look at me and the consultant says, yeah, this isn't good. You're not going anywhere, and wheels me straight off down the back to the wards. And I was in shock. It had happened so quickly. And all of a sudden, I'd been 5 days before, I'd been independent, I'd been mobile. I was able to, play team sports and do anything that I wanted. And all of a sudden, 5 days later, I was in a hospital bed with both my knees locked in place, my wrist locked, and my shoulder completely disjointed from the rest of my body. And I was in agony, but also I was in shock because I didn't know how to process that. It happened over such a short period.
It's interesting that it happened so quickly to you, because mine took 20 years to build up, and the signs kept going past me and I was ignoring them. Now I know that it can take 20 years to build up, but I didn't know anything about it then. And so first I got the little slap, and then I got the bing, and finally the 2x4 came down. And right before the 2x4 came down, I woke up and my tongue and my lips and my eyes were swollen shut. You would have thought I would have gone, something's very wrong here. But no, I pushed through it. And then I woke up and I couldn't move because everything hurt. So your body just all at once just started to shut down.
Yeah, and they thought initially that it was like a type of reaction, and that my immune system had attacked maybe an infection that I'd got previously, and some of the debris had landed in my joints, and then my body had encoded itself to attack that. So I kind of went through that process of then like going through these emotions. So after the shock wore off, I kind of hit that emotion of desperation and a bit of frustration. Like, you know, why me? Why now? My daughter's going to be born soon. My son's come to hospital, looked at me with his big eyes, and like his big eyes said, "Why can't you get out of bed and play, Daddy?" And I was like, "Oh, this is not what I need right now. I could be doing with this maybe at some other point in my life, but not right now with the kids so little." And I knew I had to.
There's really no time to have to deal with this if you can help it.
And I was trying to be logical about it, but I knew in the bigger scheme of things that kind of passed. And I knew from my previous mental health challenges that I had to let those negative emotions come and express them as healthily as I could do, rather than suppress them and let them come back to haunt me.
And you know, that might have been your first sign, because
Mm-hmm.
depression also starts in the gut.
Mm.
If you eat lots of whole foods without the chemicals on them, you can, in many cases, impact your mental health as well.
Oh, it's the connection between nutrition and how you feel, your moods, it's massive.
It is.
90% of your serotonin receptors are in your gut.
Right. And they didn't know that until recently. They used to think
No.
they were in your brain, and now they understand they're not.
And it's amazing when you dig into these things, how much you realize that we are massively interconnected. And that plays a massive part in my work. But after that frustration and despair came a little bit of grief for my physicality and for my mobility as a young man who, in a lot of ways, I was a person who, you know, I played team sport and I ran around the garden with my son, and all of a sudden I'm not sure how long it's going to take. And I got moved up at that point onto a longer term ward. And that hospital window on that ward looked out across the valley from the place where I was in hospital to the place where I grew up as a young boy. And looking across that valley, I could see those hills that I walked across so many times. And looking out over them made me realize one thing. I'd not been grateful for losing that ability to walk until I lost it. And that changed my worldview completely, because
that's amazing.
Then I realized those people who were coming to help me go on the toilet, to shower, to feed myself, I hadn't been grateful enough to them. And then it went even further, and I realized that I grew up in the UK. I've never faced war or conflict, famine or hunger, never faced environmental disaster. I've had free healthcare, free education, freedom to set up a business, and opportunities to do so many things, travel the world, see and meet so many amazing people. Why should I lie here and be sorry about this disease? It's probably happened for me to tell me to get out of my comfortable position and help me to kind of have some uncertainty in my life that would keep moving me forward and almost help me chisel my own character. And at that point, I decided I'm going to attack this disease as much as it's attacking me. It's not going to define me. It is going to be part of me for the journey, but it's not going to define me, because I set those rules. This has happened, but how I respond is my choice.
Yeah, you took back your power.
Yeah, so I'm going to take ownership of my health outcomes and recovery. I'm going to be proactive and go through all the challenges that I face, knowing that I want to get back on my feet and play with my children. That's an incredible power of why in these situations, because I got discharged and went into walking rehab, and I sat there with other people who had had lower limb injuries, who'd had spinal injuries, who'd had all sorts of challenges. And in that room, I started to realize there were some people like me who had accepted what had happened and taken ownership of the recovery. They sat in that waiting room with their heads up, ready to go and try another day. And there was
figure
others,
out a better solution.
yeah, and there were others who'd not accepted it yet, and they were in that waiting room. The world was against them. Their heads were down. They couldn't see where they could go. The boundaries and the limits were still there. And I decided to remove those and say, I don't know what the boundary or limit is until I go and chase it. And I went through that, and my daughter was born, and I just saw, as I held her, I realized she's not got any of society's boundaries or limits or any of these expectations or beliefs that we pick up over the years. She's just pure. She's just her. And very soon she's going to be walking, and I'm going to be walking with her. And that power, instead of being like a candle inside when the wind comes along and the challenges come, getting blown out, it became like a fire inside me. And when the winds of adversity came and I had some problems with my spine, it fueled me to become even more determined to recover and get back walking. And that process took 11 months for me to walk a mile unaided. But at that point, that sent me off on a new journey, because I was like, okay, so if I can get back on my feet and walk, what else can I do?
Yeah, I recently came across a quote that when you can take on your challenges and overcome them and then tell your story so that others can hear it, that's when you know what your purpose is.
Yeah, and your purpose is chiseled by action and facing your vulnerability.
Right.
Stepping into challenge instead of seeing things as a threat and trying to avoid them. Because the truth is, adversity doesn't discriminate. It hits everyone during their lives. And our lives are like the seasons. We have summers of comfort and warmth and happiness, and we have winters where it's challenging. But we prepare for those. So we should prepare for those in our lives as well. Because really, it's in the winter when we, as human beings, kind of hibernate and grow. But we prepare for that, and we build, and we almost expect our lives to be a comfortable straight line.
And if they were, we would not appreciate them. It's the growth periods of the dark times that make us into who we are, and also allow us to be grateful for this mystery that we're living called life. It's miraculous, and we don't take time to relish that we have it and that we have so much power over it. And that's what you were coming to, and I applaud you for that.
Yeah, and I think in so many ways we actually need those, those psychic 2x4s to hit us. Bang! Okay, you're out of your pattern. Start being grateful for what you've got and see the bigger picture. And okay, let's see what impact you can make on the world and actually leave a legacy that you'd be proud of and do something that makes a difference to others, because you're not here on this planet alone. There's 7 billion other humans, most of whom will feel the exact same thing you feel right now. And almost everyone on the planet has felt like you do right now at some point.
Right.
So we become so self-absorbed in this world. We think it's our problems. We expect that we don't have problems. Our problems are really big, when in reality, if you kind of move out to the sun, you could fit 3 million Earths into the sun. How big is your problem now?
Right. Well, and you did not have the victim mentality. A lot of people will get into the victim mentality, and victim mentality does absolutely nothing for you. You have to take on the challenge with vigor, because there is no wall that you can't get over if you set your mind to it. You may not get around it the first time or even the second time, but there's always a way to get over it, and you just keep going for it until you figure it out.
Yeah, and as humans, we're incredibly versatile and agile, human beings. Every time we've overcome an obstacle in our existence, we've found a way around it.
Right.
And that's exactly why humans have evolved and become as complex as we are, because we've managed to look at the barriers, the challenges, the obstacles, and all these things that we have that are technically against us, but they're not. They're for us, because we wouldn't exist without challenge. We've evolved to be able to deal with challenges. That's the kind of human being that we are. And yeah, that does mean that our brains are pretty sticky for negative things, because otherwise we'd have been eaten. It wasn't that long ago that if you were cruising round at night, we were prey. You were going to get eaten.
Right.
And now we drive around in the night and think that the world is ours. And it wasn't that long ago that all of a sudden us as little monkeys decided we were going to take over the world. And I quite often laugh because there is a few little monkeys in positions of power who definitely think they can take over the world right now.
I joke that, I shared with you before we went live that I had a huge problem with stress. I had my own business. I thought stress was good for me. I thought it was getting me to get more done. And guess what? That tiger almost cut and ate me, because I let that stress get completely out of control, and I did nothing to bring. Everybody has stress, but mine was running constantly at toxic stress level. And so, once we recognize that, which I don't know where I was that I wasn't recognizing. I actually even had friends who were trying to convince me to do something about my stress level. But once you figure out that there is something you can do about it, it's amazing how much better you feel and how much more productive I am now that I do little exercises that let the top off of that chronic stress before it becomes toxic.
Yeah, and I think that became the tipping point for me as well, because when I recovered the ability to walk, I was like, what's next? And then I was like, this medication that I'm on that controls my immune system and manages my pain, I don't want to be on this medication for the rest of my life. This medication is cytotoxic. The people at the pharmacy, the chemists giving it to me, they wear gloves so they don't get it on themselves. It kills your cells. How can that be good for your long-term health? So I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to find a way to come off this, because I actually want a health span and a lifespan that goes into my later years, being well, being active, and not being obliterated by this medication. Because they give this medication to people to terminate abortions. They give this medication to people with cancer, hoping that it'll also attack the cancerous cells. This is not nice stuff. And I was like, right, so I've got this knowledge from my sporting background and from my qualifications. I know if I start to treat my nutrition as an experiment, start to look at my sleep, find my biorhythms, find what works for me, and start to look at my movement and ensure that I do as much as I can without fatiguing too much, but make sure I do enough so I'm not stiff and in pain. And I start to bind all that into a mindset where I look not at my pains, but realizing that my pain is a signal to grow, and actually see that if I resist the pain, it causes suffering. But if I accept the pain, I seem to be able to just transcend it and move on. If I combine all those four together, I bet you I can get off this medication. And then it started the journaling, excluding one ingredient from my diet, including another one. How do I feel at the time? 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. These journals start stacking up. I'm starting to realize there are things that energize me. There are things that I can tolerate. There are things which drain me. And there are things which set my inflammation off. And I can create a diet for me, not some diet plan.
Tailored directly to you.
Yeah, not some belief system diet, like eat this but don't eat this. I can work a diet that works for me and build in lots of things that energize me, a few things that I can tolerate, and very, very occasionally, one of those things which isn't really very good, but just so I don't completely flood the river of rigidity, I will step into that. But now I will know the body is an amazing feedback loop. It's telling you what's good and what's not.
Oh yeah. One of the things I ask my clients to do is when they get up in the morning, look in the mirror and ask your body, how do you feel? How do you feel right now at this moment in time? And I do it every morning and I adjust immediately. And your body wants to tell you, you just have to get quiet enough to listen.
Yeah, and it's massive because as I went through that and the journal started to stack up and I experimented with my sleep, the temperature, my bedding, the environment, the lighting, my bedtime routine, the hours that I slept between, and I started to realize actually that's better. I got some like data technology which was helping me see my sleep cycles and just started to bring all that together. And what I realized is when you listen, over time, you start to build up an incredible acuity to be able to hear all these things that when you're just walking around in life, existing on autopilot, you just,
right.
You've lost
And
that.
you have to start somewhere. You won't hear it in the beginning. I agree with that. But as you become attuned, if I have, and I don't get pain anymore, but I do still get inflammation. I can gain 5 pounds overnight if I did something that I shouldn't be doing. I'll lay in bed and I'll go through my head. What did I do that is causing this? And then I adjust. I don't let it get out of control anymore.
Yeah.
And it does take learning how to let your body talk to you and how to hear it.
Yeah. And I almost kind of say that it's a lot like a muscle. You go to the gym and you do your exercise and your muscle gets a bit stressed. And then you go home and you sleep and it gets bigger and it can do a little bit more. That's exactly how listening to your body works. You've got to practice it. At first, you don't really get much feedback, but the more you listen, all of a sudden that capacity increases. The sound gets louder, it gets stronger. It's like building a body, but you can't see it. And because it's not tangible, people quite often give up in the first few weeks because he's saying I could, I could get really good feedback in here and it's not working. I'm like, no. These things start small, but they compound over time. It's like anything.
Well, and how many years did it take both of us to get to where we were? Obviously longer for me because I'm an old broad. But, we seem to think that we should snap our fingers and be better. If it took a long time to build up to bring us to that diseased state, we need to understand that doing the right thing could take a little time to bring us back to health.
Yeah. So I always paraphrase that with ideas like, you wouldn't decide that you wanted a baby to be formed in a month, would you? It takes 9 months for a reason to get everything together. You wouldn't you can't suddenly magic a baby to appear in a week and expect it to be fully formed, and neither is your ability. I say, you're not going to go to the gym for a few weeks and suddenly look like that muscle man out of the movies. All these processes take time. And to be honest, if they didn't take time, you would eat that cream cake and put 50 pounds on. And I guarantee you that if it did, you wouldn't eat it.
Right. Well, and with weight, we think that we could snap our fingers and lose it all too. Took a long time. And see, I don't even believe in dieting anymore. I believe in eating real whole foods loaded with nutrients of all the colors of the rainbow and to enjoy it so that you don't want to ever go back to all that crud you used to be eating that makes you feel lousy.
Yeah. And it's amazing to think that it was only 50 years ago that stuff, that edible food-like substance, it was in boxes that was all funny colors because they called it imitation food. It wasn't that long ago.
No, and I remember it. I was there then. I remember when TV dinners came out and we thought they were so wonderful. We didn't think about the fact that they were loaded with synthetic ingredients, and certainly we didn't think about that in processed food boxes.
No.
Nor did we ever consider what it was doing. We weren't getting any building blocks for our bodies. The bodies are pretty resilient. They kept us going a long time before the boom started coming down on each of us.
Oh, yeah. And what's funny is we only see the impact of that now. But what's the impact of what's happening now in another 50 years? It's scary to think that it takes people like us to try and champion the fact that you should go out and experiment with your food and realize that don't listen to what the food scientists tell you to eat because they have many influences and they're just trying to make it hyper palatable, so it tastes good right now.
Well, and they make it so that it's very inexpensive so that they get more profit. But they're not out there working for our health with what they're producing. They're out there working for their profit. So, and I get a lot of resistance from clients who don't want to cook their own food and don't want to buy food as close to the farm as possible. But you feel the difference if you do that. And that is the foundation for so much of health. It's not everything. And
No.
in the United States, there are toxins literally everywhere. And they all need to go because they're all poisoning us. But why we think here that it's a good idea to spray our crops with herbicides and pesticides and then not harm to our bodies, I don't get it. And that's why we're 37th in the world in health and over 50% of our children are sick. You guys don't have quite the same problem as we do, but you're eating a lot of American food products. So you do have a big chunk of the problem that we have. And
Yeah.
we all need to clean it up because our bodies can't utilize that crud.
Yeah, and it's like it would be very similar to America here if there wasn't the European laws that we've now come out of that mean that we, you know, people will sell chlorinated chicken and, you know, products with high fructose, glucose syrup and all these really chemical processed things that ultimately are not food. It's just kind of, it almost fills stuff out, so it's cheaper to produce. And it's sad, really. But again, the most disadvantaged people end up in a situation where they're not going to get the very short farm to fork food because it's out of the price bracket. They're trying to survive. And unfortunately, for me, a big part of what I do is trying to get into the communities and try to help them understand that if you can have a bit less to eat, but it'd be better food, you'll be so much better in terms of how you feel, and you'll give your children the opportunity to see a better future. And that's
I have a whole chapter on rethinking your budget, because if we think about it, there are things we can give up so that we can buy quality food. Do we really need to stop on the way to work to buy that coffee? You can make your own coffee and put it into a stainless steel container, and it's still hot when you get to work, and it's at a fraction of the cost, and it's probably a high quality organic coffee if you're very conscious. Do we really need to eat lunch out every day with our friends? Why can't we take our lunch with us? It's a lot cheaper to take our lunch with us. And they go, well, yeah, but they all want to go to restaurants, and I don't want to be embarrassed because I'm going to pull up my own food. I said, it's about your body. I do it all the time. Nobody ever said to me, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, I order something that I can eat to pay the restaurant, and then I eat my high quality food because I'm not going backwards again. I feel too good to give it up. So there's lots of places, you know, do you have to go drinking after work? Why not invite all your friends over to your house? Everybody brings a bottle of wine. You have a great time at a fraction of the cost. There are ways to save the money if you put your mind to it, and it's important. So you need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, and again, that's such a valid point. And I think to kind of, as we bring this towards a close, my big part of my work now is about going into workplaces and engaging with employees and ultimately explaining that you don't need permission to go and start experimenting. And I want you to almost in your minds put your lab coat on and your little goggles like you're in science at school. You go and treat your nutrition like an experiment, because there's so much out there that's not good. There's so much out there that you need to find out about your own nutrition and your own sleep and your own movement. But don't listen to other people. You don't need to conform to a society, because society is pretty sick. So if you conform, you're going to get pretty sick as well. I've been there. I've been sick, and I've decided that I'm not walking in society's direction. I found my own path, and so can you. And you don't.
Well, and we need our doctors. I'm a health coach. I went to health coach school. I also have a BA from Berkeley, but we need our doctors. I'm not going to tell you we don't need our doctors, But don't give him all your power. He is not the who said of the greatest magnitude. Whatever he says to you, go home and research. Go back to him with the information so that you can have a robust conversation, because he can't feel what you feel. You're the only person who can feel it. And I didn't know that, at least in the United States, they don't even get a half a day on nutrition. So all those doctors who would say silly things like, you need to lose weight, and you say, okay, how would I do that? And they go, I don't really know. That's because they never learned that. That's not part of their schooling. So you need to know it. You are where the buck stops for your body. And don't let your doctor bully you or tell you anything that doesn't resonate with you. And in this day of computers, there's no reason why you can't do your own research and then go back to him and have a robust conversation. I'm lucky I have a doctor who spends 45 minutes with me each appointment. She researches, I research, and then we have a robust conversation and we decide what we're going to do for my body next. But she's also a functional doctor. She graduated from Yale. She graduated from a regular medical school, but she got sick and went back for functional certification, which is true of most functional doctors. And I'd love to think that functional medicine is the future here and in England, but there's no money to be made in it. They start with holistic approaches and then can prescribe pharmaceuticals if they need to. And so you just need to know what's out there and you need to seek it out. In this country, you can go to ifm.org and find doctors who've been trained functionally. They're full doctors. They just approach the whole body and not each organ system.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because ultimately we know that in a world where everyone focuses on isolation, everything is interconnected, and the continual look for, oh, you've got this symptom, and therefore we can give you this medicine which will cause these 10 side effects because everything's interconnected, but we've solved that symptom, but that's caused more, and now I need some. So yeah, it's about people appreciating that we're all interconnected, mind, body, spirit, as human beings across the planet, and your whole body is a mass of interconnected energies and ultimately atoms firing together and wiring together and making us the amazingly authentic people that we are. But that's yours. You can't rely on experts to tell you about you, because you are the expert on you. You just need to start writing your own story by listening to yourself and treating yourself like an experiment, like you deserve to. We go to school and learn so much, but we should go to a school of life, the school of you, and investigate yourself, understand how you work, and be able to be authentically you and express it, because the root of the word authentic is author. So you should be writing your own story.
I love that.
So many people today let everyone else write in the book, and at some point in the life when crisis comes, you get that book out and realize this isn't my story. It's been written by completely other people. You choose who writes in your book, and if needs be, start again and start to really define who you are. And that just requires a bit of time to just reflect and understand yourself. And that's what I did. That's what I now teach. And I give people the permission and space to say, look, we are amazingly complex, but all the answers are inside of you.
Right. Thank you. I want to talk about one more thing before our time is over. And I love this. It's everything that I could have asked for from a guest. So thank you. But I want you to share how you work with a team of disabled kids and coach them in Northern England. I am impressed that you do that. So I want you to share a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so the team, it was really a big part of my recovery. So the team has an adult disability team and a children's disability team. And I actually played with the adults when I was recovering walking, because I needed a space to be able to be a little bit competitive. But obviously I wasn't able to run around. And playing disability soccer really gave me a place to express myself, to make new friends, and to be surrounded by people who all have challenges, but we all come together on a Monday and train and then go and do competitions around the north of England together. And for me, it just became something so ingrained in me because I love helping people. It's really a massive part of my purpose and mission is to help and empower others. And I saw the smiles on their faces. For some of our players, their life challenges are significant enough that that Monday session with us, it was the best part of their week. And what kind of happens is when you see the smiles on their faces, you know this is the next generation of young people, and they're going to become adults who themselves are going to have challenges as adults, and they're going to rely on services and the parents to help them navigate an increasingly dynamic and changing world. But if I can give them that smile, that, you know, that compassion, but ultimately, again, permission to be them in a world where so often they'll be told, you can't be you because, well, you're not normal. You're not
and you
this.
can't
You're
do
not
that, and you can't do this. We could do anything that
Yeah.
we really set our minds to at some level.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we don't have some handicaps, and I'm sure your kids do, but you give them hope for a better tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's really why I do it, because ultimately we don't talk about disability. We talk about ability. We look at what they have. We look at the gain that they can make, not the gap that they've got. And by helping them with that mindset, they start to break through boundaries. All of a sudden, they've started to do things that people said they wouldn't do. They've been able to transcend these things. And I watch that and it fills me with joy inside because they've become hopeful. They've become optimistic. And all of a sudden, they go and do things that astonish people because they didn't think they would. And that really is what we need to try and do for our next generation. We don't really need to...
No matter what their handicaps are.
We don't need to educate them because they educate themselves by navigating the world. We need to enable and empower them, give them little bits of insight and inspiration on that journey, and really just encourage them to break through the boundaries and the limits that society sets. Because so many people, and including quite a lot of people in the medical profession, they train based on medical journals and guidelines so they can diagnose, but they're never taught how to communicate. So they end
or the empathy.
Yeah, and they end up giving people limits and boundaries because we trust experts, people who we consider to be experienced. We have a bias where we trust them. We believe what they say because they must have seen it so many times. They must have spent years and, you know, lots of dollars spending to train to become this person with the letters after the name and be in this job of authority. But sometimes the words that they use, they can disempower, they can put false limits on people. And
I yelled at my mother's doctor and said, how many of your patients actually get better because you tell them that they can't? He didn't like that very much, but when she finally passed away 8 years later, he called me and thanked me for that, because it changed how he looked at what came out of his mouth dramatically.
And I think that's what this podcast has done today. It's allowed people to see that no matter what your challenge is, you can break through those limits. Don't let other people tell you what you can and can't do, because you're unique, you're magnificent, and you can express that by learning yourself more.
And it starts with you believing that you have the power.
Because we all have the power.
Right. Thank you. I love it that you've been on my podcast. Tell everybody how they can find you, and then I'll also put it in the show notes.
Yep. So I'm at www.essentialise.co.uk, at leechambers.org, and at all social platforms at Essentialise Coach.
And you are a resilience coach. I know you're a sleep coach. There's something else that you coach as well. Certainly mindset.
Yeah. So I do workshops on mindset, on nutrition, on sleep, and on resilience.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lee. I loved having you here. I want to stay in touch with you. I want to hear about your successes as you go through them in your life. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I hope everybody has grown from hearing your story. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, it's been a privilege, Cheryl. Thank you again.